The parable of the prodigal son is so beautiful that one can hear it over and over again without getting bored by it. At least I find so. But some background to the parable also helps. By the Jewish standards of the time, the father in this little drama has already overdone the milk of human kindness in the very first act. Why so? Because the Hebrew Bible warns fathers not to part with their goods before they die, since in doing so, they put themselves at risk. And it was, in fact, against the law to divide an estate in the way the father did. The entire inheritance should have gone to the firstborn son. So the father is already reckless to the point of illegality. Next, the prodigal son, having squandered his inheritance, is keeping alive by herding pigs. Just about the most abhorrent profession there could be for an Orthodox Jew. The pig is ritually taboo, probably because it figured in the idolatrous religions of Israel's neighbors. But no sense of regret or remorse seems to drive the prodigal back home. Going home was just an act of self-interest. How many of my father's hired servants have more food than they want, and here am I dying of hunger. Well, that's the first act of that drama. Then in Act 2, while the prodigal son is still far off, a tiny but just recognizable figure on the road, the father sees him, runs out to meet him, falls on his neck and kisses him. And then there begins a restitution of the son, which condenses a whole range of Old Testament allusions. He's given a ring, like the stranger Joseph was by Pharaoh. The fatted calf is slain for him, as it was by Abraham for his angelic visitors. And far from remonstrating with the prodigal over what he's done, the father lavishes honors on him in his relief and rejoicing. This is a contrast, then, between expectation and reality, which it's the role of the elder son now to make plain. He's always been a good boy, hardworking, trustworthy, uncomplaining. Typically, he's still out of the fields, still at work, and only hears about the party because he hears music coming from the house. No one told him. No one brought him in. And his reaction is, understandably, waves of anger. Perhaps the first time in his life, he won't accept his father's decision, rejecting what the father has done as unjust and outrageous. And from any ordinary point of view, he's quite correct. And the father can only repeat that love has made him do this. He defends his behavior by echoing the words of the patriarch Jacob when he clasped Joseph to his bosom. It was fitting to make merry and be glad, for this your brother was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found. Well, let's fast forward for about 3,000 years to take a pinch. In a famous painting by one of the Van Eyck brothers, a tiny mirror at the center of the picture space exactly reflects a room where a betrothal is taking place. And in the parable of the prodigal son, we are meant to see, like the viewer of Van Eyck's painting, a whole world reflected in a tiny space. The world of God's gracious relations with ourselves. This parable is a miniature painting of the gospel of grace. Here we have as a story what St. Paul will articulate as a doctrine. The doctrine that God in his own nature is burning righteousness, ardent, zealous holiness. Nevertheless, in order to save us, he becomes for us a gracious God, a God of excessive mercy, a God of love. So in the dispensation of salvation, he awaits us at each moment, like the father in the parable, scanning the horizon from the farmyard gate, looking down the road for the prodigal to return. Where sin abounds, there grace abounds the more. Now we see the God of grace as he is, the merciful Father who beckons us as our goal at the end of the road, at the end of the world.